challenge about how utterly urgent it is that we disciple and train and lead our children and do it well. Now, I'm going to tie into how I began the other night, and I'm using an analogy from a book called Teaching True Love to a Sex at 13 Generation. There's a reason why I said the other night, we must not begin with the guilt trip. The gospel itself has to be the real motivator for this. And this analogy they use here really helps you understand why it matters how you teach these things. If the only tool in your toolbook is don't and law and ick, you're not going to get very far. So I'm going to read a page from here just because they say it so well that I can't top it. So they're using, I need bifocals, but I'm too stubborn to get them. Greek mythology tells of a certain group of evil, conniving mermaids called the Sirens. These mermaids, though spectacular in beauty, were devilish. Their weapon was their intoxicating song. Sitting on rocks, the Sirens would sing their tempting tune as ships passed. A powerful enticement no hot-blooded man could resist. The lustful melody could control the wills of men, and the song could woo the most steely-hearted ship captain to turn towards the Sirens' rocky coastline and a watery grave. Then came Ulysses, a ship captain of great renown, who had to pass those shores, but he was determined not to fall victim to their allurement like others. So as they approached, he commanded his crew to stuff beeswax in their ears so they wouldn't be overcome by the haunting songs. Ulysses, however, was intrigued to hear the music, but knew he couldn't withstand the temptation. So he commanded his crew to tie him to the mast of the ship tightly, so that he could hear the song, but be unable to steer his ship in the wrong direction. As the intoxicating melody filled the air, Ulysses is overcome with an uncontrollable longing to steer his ship towards their dangerous shore. His knees buckle, his mind swoons, and he screams for the crew to turn the boat towards the singing, but they're under orders not to heed his voice, and their ears are plugged. He curses and writhes in agony, consumed by one thought: I must quench this thirst for this siren song, and furiously sought to untie the ropes, but his efforts were useless, and he shakes in misery until finally the music fades. When the danger is past, Ulysses is untied and falls on the deck of the ship, exhausted and humiliated, and yet a hero. What few ever had done, he made it past temptation. His crew applauded them, but he was miserable the entire time. And so often, our approach to all this is don't. Okay? And this is what Eric Ludy writes. He said, inwardly, I hated that stupid mast and despised the ropes that held me there and resented the fact that God tied me. I wanted to crash and experience what everyone else was experiencing. Everyone else had the freedom to recklessly steer towards the coastline, and I had to listen, bound by rules and distance. And I made it, but I was miserable. He says, in youth group, I received pep talks on enduring rope burn and trying to find joy in the mast. And I heard messages on the dangers of the siren shoreline and on choosing not to let the music get to you. But in clandestine meetings when parents and leaders weren't around, we Christian teens would examine the loopholes in the rope system and try to chart ways to bring our love boats as close to the rocks as possible without going all the way into the danger zone. That summarizes the wrong way to teach this. That not the guilt trip, but the glory trip. And he then goes on to talk about a better message. And in this case, he mentions the other Greek ship captain, the Orpheus approach. He didn't use beeswax and he didn't use ropes. And he looked on the dangerous coastline as an opportunity. As the ship approached the siren enticement, his crew let out a shout of joy. The sirens, Captain Orpheus, it's time. Bring me the case, boomed Orpheus, and the sailors cheered. A beautiful, adorned case was brought, and Orpheus opened it, a lovely musical instrument studded with jewels and plated with precious metals. Play it, Captain, roared the crew. Play us your song. And as the siren's melody began to fill the air, Orpheus played his instrument, the most perfect music human ears had heard. The crewmen lost in the grandeur and majesty of the song. And all too soon, the siren coastline was out of sight, and the master musician concluded the song, and not a man had been tempted to the sirens. They hadn't noticed it, because Orpheus played for his crew a sweeter song. We don't need, as today's young people, more lectures on how to tie ourselves to the mast or the dangers of the coastline. What we need is the sweeter song. So that's why I begin as I do with the glory trip, not the guilt trip.
So how do we start? How do we... At the beginning of this, I would like to shake you. I know we don't want to put you on a guilt trip, but we do want to shake you awake. We want to make you aware of all the things that are going on. So often, I think, over the last 2 days, we have talked about changes in culture, the dangers out there. But I think so many parents still go like this when it comes to our own children and what they face in high school.
In Christian high school.
In Christian high school, yes. We might not be teaching true love to a sex at 13 generation, but as parents, we are definitely teaching the beauty of sexuality to a generation that will be confronted with an awful lot by the age 14 when they enter high school. Some earlier on because of sexual abuse. Just a few examples of what we have been, what we've seen just in the last few months in our own lives, but also the last few years in our ministry. Social media. So many kids are still on Snapchat. So many parents are still unaware of what is all available on Snapchat. By simply swiping, Snapchat is educating your and our teenagers of how to best have relationship with the opposite gender or with same gender. And this is 24/7. How many of your children have their phones in their bedroom? I think, especially during the years of COVID, it's become very hard to keep the rule of no screens in bedroom. All of a sudden, our teenagers came home with their own Chromebooks, and everybody was sitting in their own little corner, doing their own thing. And all of a sudden, as a mom, I was thinking, how in the world am I gonna keep track of what my kids are doing on their screens? Pornography. Just recently, it happened in a high school where a boy had requested a picture of a boy in his year, a naked picture of him, and he was showing it around at school. Can you imagine the harm done to the boy whose picture it was? How is he ever gonna face his peers again at school? What the harm it has done to other boys who've maybe never ever seen pornography, and all of a sudden it's right in their face? How many of our sons come home from basketball tournaments, volleyball tournaments, mingling with other students from other schools, being faced all of a sudden with pornography? Are we equipping our boys, our daughters, our sons and daughters to be able to turn away from it, to have an answer, and to stay strong?
So another example. So let me give you a couple of examples from our Christian high school. One young man who just graduated from grade 12 a year ago bragged that he had slept with 10 girls before he graduated and was trying to make it 12. 95% of the young men in our high school are watching pornography. It is that bad. There are a few exceptions, and in doing this course, and this is where you need to realize how bad pornography is. How destructive and devastating it absolutely is. If anything, we're understating the damage. There are kids in my congregation whose parents thought, oh, we don't need a filter. They just need to learn to resist. Their son came to my son at age 14 and said, I've been into pornography since I was 8, and my parents didn't know, and will you be my accountability partner? I am done with being polite on this issue. And if parents who are too stupid to protect their own homes, do you realize that every kind of perversion is available at a moment? And it breaks my heart that that young man has now had 6 years of pornography addiction because his parents were too stupid to take their responsibility seriously. Sometimes we need somebody to take a 2x4 out and start swinging and saying, wake up. Every kind of perversion that devastates their ability to be a godly man and a husband is available like that. I watched a YouTube clip from Vadi Bakum about homosexuality. Google apparently thought I need a little balance. So for 2 months, YouTube was showing the top video on their recommendations for me. How gay are you? That's the world we live in. And you need to wake up and recognize that this is being shoved in the face of your children. One talk is not going to cut it. There needs to be an internal and external filtering system that's constantly monitored and maintained. Is there one more?
Yes.
Yes.
One last one, and I think something very much ignored is aggressive girls. Something that I actually was surprised by over the last year, that I've noticed how aggressive our girls have become in the high school towards boys. How they push themselves into their face, not only the way they dress, and we'll touch on that again, and honestly, this is not body shaming, but we have seen girls in high school literally going to the boys' doorstep saying, I'm available, would you like to have sex? Well, how is a boy going to say no to that? You need to be very, very strong. Yeah. We were going to skip that one, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. Or not? Yeah, we want to skip that one? We did some tinkering here. Is this where you want to be? Building a culture of openness?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so building a culture of openness in your home, and getting, which button do I have to push?
Just the right arrow key will give you the next one. Yeah.
Okay, there. The most important thing is that you yourself have a living relationship with Christ. How else can you teach your children the gospel message of sexuality if you don't have that living relationship yourself? How can you, in the midst of parenting, when you make mistakes, how can you go to your child and make it right? You both need the gospel at that moment. When you admit you're wrong as a parent and when you ask for forgiveness. I can get very angry and upset when I see these sometimes you see these clips on Facebook. I'm influenced by social media as well. You see these clips show up on Facebook of moms that need wine to be able to parent their children. How ridiculous. And we're watching that, and I see moms in my community laughing about it and clicking likes about moms that need wine to be able to survive the day with their toddler. We don't need wine. The Bible teaches us to be sober-minded, to be on guard. We don't need wine, we need Christ. Gain knowledge. So many of us say, I don't know. I had no idea. So when you get married and you start having children, prepare yourself already. Gain knowledge about our culture that we live in, about raising children, about the things that are important to you. Think about the issues that are going on and form opinions based on God's word. Don't be a follower. Be a guard at the door of your house. Be aware of everything that comes into your house, but also that leaves your house. Be a guard that is willing to stand firm on the foundation of God's word. Social media is making all of us followers. It's something that kind of struck me a couple weeks ago. That all of a sudden I was aware that on Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, they choose for me what they think I will probably like. I'm not the one who's choosing anymore. They choose for me. And so many of our young people are just swiping and swiping and swiping and watching and liking and being influenced constantly without making choices based on God's word. So become a thinker and raise your kids to become thinkers. So when do we start? As soon as they can talk. And I really mean that, literally, as soon as they can talk. Okay, I can. So I think about Deuteronomy 6. God's law on your head and on your hands, so that wherever you are in life with your child, that you interact with them, and that you grab every opportunity to pass on the truth of God's word. With the next sections, I try to give you examples of raising children at a younger age and at an older age. Just examples from our only daily life, how we have done it. So the beauty of God's design for manhood and womanhood. And I want to include with that gender issues, like how do we talk to our children and about people that are struggling with same-sex attractions. The foundation is, of course, God's creation. And there's a beautiful book from Susan Hunt, God's Wonderful Design, that you can use for younger children. You can, books for younger girls too, The Beauty of Womanhood, how God has created them. But older kids too. So quickly in our circles, it's being laughed at, or being gay is being used as a joke. It happens in our household too, that the boys will talk in a certain voice, or they will stand a certain way, and everybody's laughing. And I said to them once, like, do you actually know what you're doing? You're making like a group of people, you're laughing at them. And we're creating an atmosphere where actually, if there are children who have these feelings, if they see the ridicule and the jokes going around, how are they ever going to stand up one day and actually share with their friends, you know what, that's actually who I am?
What I'm struggling with. It's not that.
Yes.
To give you another example, I sometimes said to my kids, I said, that could be you someday, because we don't choose which aspect necessarily of original sin is our burden. When some people say, but I didn't choose these feelings, they're being honest. So I've said to some of my kids, if I detect this any form of belittling, I said, that could be you 5 years from now. So don't talk like that.
It could be your friend in youth group, right?
You need to act with compassion and kindness and seek to walk alongside someone, not create a category by your casual words that make someone feel like a moral leper.
Abuse prevention. It starts already at a very young age where, as a mom or as a dad, as we would give our kids a bath, that every now and then we would say something like, God made you special. And when we give you a bath, you know, that is something only mom and dad can do. Or you might have someone in your family that you entrust your children to with bath time. but that they know, okay, undressing and showing myself naked is something I only do with mom and dad. Someone can trust. I was confronted with that again. One of our kids had to go to the hospital, and the doctor asked him to take his underwear off, and he looked at me with big eyes. And in the back of my mind, I thought, that's good. That's good. He knows it, right? And that I can look him in the eye and I can say, it's okay, it's safe. I'm here with you, and you can do as the doctor says. It starts about touching, and I love this series from one of the authors is Holcomb, and the books are on the table by Reformed Book Services. God Made All of Me. God Made Me Unique. It's a beautiful series that you can start already at the age of 3. At the discipleship, that ongoing talk with your children about boundaries. I've had a nephew who absolutely didn't like hugs. Well, I think 40 years ago, he would have been forced, right? Respect those boundaries. That if your child doesn't want to give a hug, that's okay. You can come up with something else. And, a handshake or a high five, that's okay. But also honoring the body of the other person. I was talking with my 10-year-old, actually. It's kind of the age where still you're kind of laughing about the opposite sex, like boys are this and girls are that. But I told them, be careful how you talk about the girls in your class. Don't make jokes about their body. You can really hurt them. Instilling in them an awe for God's creation, the other person, respecting the other person, respecting boundaries. Another thing is sleepovers. I know there has been a lot of talk actually lately about, are we still going to do sleepovers? Can we trust our children? I think I read a blog from Tim Challies in which he explained that his family said, no more sleepovers for our family. We've been in a position with our family always being far away that we sometimes had to entrust our children to other families so we could visit family. I would still say, and I say this with a reservation, as parents, we are still okay with sleepovers if we really know the family well. And again, I say, you can still be clueless what is going on behind walls in that home. And that's why it is so important that you have built these things with your child, that if something happens. One time, years ago, one of my kids came back from a sleepover, and he actually shared with me, and those parents might have said, they might have laughed it off, like, that was just kind of silly. But there was this girl who kept on pulling down the pants from the older brother. And my son was part of that. And he was hugely embarrassed. And that's wrong. And I complimented him. And I said, I'm so thankful that you shared that with me, because that is wrong. She's not allowed to do that. But how many parents still laugh that off as saying, that was just kids playing? It's not. We need to respect those boundaries, and our kids need to feel safe that they can share those things with us. Anything else? Then internet, I think we kind of covered.
My rant already covered that one.
Yeah, I have one more to add, and that is maybe still fairly unknown. There is another website you can visit. It's called Protect Young Eyes. And it's interesting, you can actually go to this website. It's on the resource.
Bibliography that we make.
Yeah, that's on the website. You can go to that website and you can actually do a test to see if your home is internet safe. And again, a lot of resources. Just recently, he worked together with Bob and Dana Gresh on a whole presentation about internet safety and pornography in your home. So I highly recommend that as well, beside Covenant Eyes. Sexuality, educating them step by step. Just want to look at my notes here. Yeah.
So the key here is that this is an ongoing conversation at every stage of life. That at age 3, they learn what to call their body parts, that you don't need 100 euphemisms. Like some of the stuff I saw from this Christian medical doctor's list was absolutely absurd. Just use normal words. Abusers like to use other words. And this sense that as each step unfolds, and you have to measure your child, that one child is ready far sooner than the other. The one child is much more precocious and starts asking questions, and you have to kind of gauge, where is my child? And those resources are so helpful because every time you give them another piece of the puzzle, and it slowly builds. And each child is different this way. I think of one child who, oh, Mom, gross, no, don't tell me anymore. And the next child was like, wow, my body can do all that? That's amazing. Okay. There's differences in how children react.
I think that the main resources that we have used, like really if sexuality, I'm thinking now about the big question, like how am I going to start this conversation with my child about intercourse, sexuality, how babies are made. I think with our oldest, I think I was more nervous than she was. I could hardly get it out of my mouth. So the best resources that I find is really with little kids is The Wonderful Way Babies Are Made. And what I like about this book is that you can use it for literally the age 3 until the age 8, 9. Because you have the large print that you can use for really small children, which is very helpful if you as a family are in the little stage and you as a mom, you're pregnant and your 4-year-old wants to know where babies are coming from. It's a very different stage than when your youngest is 8 and all of a sudden you realize, man, I have never really talked with him yet about these things. So The Wonderful Way Babies Are Made. And I think that is the most exhausting job as a parent, is to be in tune with your children of where are they at. There is something beautiful about a child being naive in a good way, that you say, oh, he doesn't know anything yet. And it's not bothering him yet, it's not coming up in his mind yet. I thought that's a beautiful stage. And I found it really hard to kind of measure, okay, how can I keep on speaking the truth, keep on explaining things without somehow bursting a bubble here. So I find it hard to really say, oh, by that age you really need to teach about sexual intercourse, or by that age you really need to warn him about these dangers.
The Good Pictures, Bad Pictures book. You should.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, because you or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking still. But, so yeah, The Wonderful Babies Are Made. So that is really good for the ages 3 to 8. Then as they get older, we use the book Growing Up God's Way, which what I really like about this Christian book is that it's not too graphic. You have some Christian books that teach about sexuality that I say, oh, that is just a little bit too much. And this book, just the pictures they use, the words they use, just a beautiful way to bring across how their bodies are going to change, Actually, at our elementary school, they used this book in grade 6 in 2 separate groups for boys and girls. They used some of the material of this book to teach the boys and girls how their bodies were going to change. And then as they get older, I find by then you have laid such a good foundation that it is easier to stay in touch with them. So often what I do is we read the book together, or if I kind of notice a bit of like embarrassment, I might say, you know what, why don't you read these chapters first by yourself, and then you can ask me questions, or and then build up, go slowly through the book together that way. And then often I leave the book in their bedroom because it's super interesting for them. So it's nice for them if they can read it and read it again, and often more and more questions will pop up in their mind. Another book about pornography that is very well done is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And that's the type of book you need to just have in your living room at all times. If there's a younger version and an older version, and it's the type of book they can easily read by themselves, and there's absolutely nothing in there that you say, oh, you know what, I want to be the one who shows them this. It was actually kind of funny when we had taught our oldest about, the dangers of internet, and I kind of told her, hey, if you're ever confronted with something on the computer that, like a naked body, just don't do anything, just right away come to me. Because something happens in the brain. If a child is confronted with a picture on the internet of a naked body, shame. Satan uses that right away as something, you've done something wrong, you better not tell anyone. So it's very important from an early age to tell your children, if you're confronted with something like this, your brain is going to tell you, hide it. But now you know, don't hide it, but come to me. So I just told her, and all these things are kind of nerve-wracking when it's your oldest, when you have to do these for the first time. So I think it was literally a day later, she came running to me, Mom, there is this naked body. And I thought, oh no. So I kind of follow her, and there is I think she was on a website from National Geographic, and this was a human body that was kind of cut in half, and you could see all the organs and blood, and I thought so I said, you know what, this is okay. This is not what I meant with a naked body.
I guess the point we're making is by doing the ongoing discipleship, constant conversations, before they're old enough to be embarrassed about it, they learn that they don't need to be embarrassed about it. They learn that mom and dad is the place to go because mom and dad have answers. Mom and dad have, if I have a question about something, mom and dad have stuff for me. That mom and dad is the place to go when you're feeling uncomfortable or uncertain. Is something you heard on the school bus, something somebody said. People make comments on the school bus. There's one guy who was commenting on his sister's developing breast on the school bus, and my daughter came home all fired up. And I'm glad she was fired up, and I'm glad she told me. So they're going to hear about all kinds of things in their life. From the internet, they're going to hear about pornography, they're going to hear about masturbation. I would rather they heard it from me first. And it helps, having done all these seminars by now, that any shame and embarrassment factor is long gone. They're going to run into all these things. Let them hear it from me first, because then I can do it in such a way that the glory trip and the sweeter song is their first introduction to this. Not some comment somebody made on the school bus or somebody in their class made, but something from me that planted the first seeds of the sweeter song, and how special and how beautiful and how good it is that God made us this way. So we have to move on, otherwise our timer's dying here. Okay. Dating.
But, okay.
Did we miss?
Dating, yeah. So, we're moving on. I'm glad, this is my timer. Dating. So I think we all recognize the fun table conversations of, oh, I know who so-and-so likes, right? And then the other one turns all red from embarrassment, and no, I I don't like him, and yeah, I do, and we all laugh about it, right? And we all kind of poke fun about it, and we kind of, try to kind of get the name out of their mouth, who it is they like. But in the meantime, it can all be funny, right? When they're in grade 4 and they're all grossed out about girls that like them. Grade 6, it becomes a little bit more. But what if your child is in grade 8 and half the class is dating by the end of grade 8, right? Dating like, 4 weeks and then it's done again. Do we need to take this seriously or not? So at home, we laugh about these things, right? And we joke with them. But in the meantime, they do know that mom and dad have principles. So what we teach our children is dating is never for fun. Not in grade 8, not in grade 4, and not in grade 12, not ever. There are people involved, and emotions are involved, and people will get hurt. As parents, we need to take these emotions very seriously. Liking someone can go very deep. So if you don't get that seriously, you can seriously hurt someone. Another principle we have is that dating should not even be on your radar if you're not ready for marriage in the next 2 years. And later on, we will teach more about the boundaries we set in dating, that you also realize, if you want to hold on to these boundaries, who in the world can date for 4 or 5 years, right? And stick to these boundaries set in God's Word. And another thing we have is that we want our kids to focus on first, most of all, their relationship with Christ. How can you start thinking about dating if your relationship with Christ is not developed and matured? I think our focus should be more encouraging our children to have good friendships and to have fun. And I really struggle, I don't know how it is in other Christian schools, but so far the Christian schools that we have seen, there is so much focus on dating. Especially when you enter high school, you're almost not fully mature if you're not dating or if you haven't been in a relationship yet. And I think we need parents to come alongside other parents and our children and try to change that culture around cultivating good friendships, but above all, the focus on their relationship with Christ.
So part of the difficulty is that, because the question you have to answer is whatever you call it, dating, courtship. I'm mostly on the courtship page, as you'll see. But what is it for? If you don't answer that question first, it's just because it's exciting that someone likes me and these beautiful feelings need to be explored, or it's fun to have someone to make out with, to put it crassly. That's not what this is for. Because this is sacred and beautiful, your body, your sexuality, your desires and attractions, that how you define this is going to determine where you set the boundaries. I'm sometimes surprised. I've heard one pastor say, well, as long as your touch stays from the neck up. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree and tell you, and I think most married people would agree with me, that French kissing is sexual foreplay. It is. As a married couple, you know that pretty much that's what it is. So why are you playing with fire? Why are you arousing yourself? Anything that deliberately arouses you and intensifies your desire for intercourse, you need to say for marriage. You're torturing yourself by not doing so, because God has designed one thing to lead to the next thing, to lead to the next thing. And if you want to go halfway down that road and then interrupt, first of all, you're torturing yourself. Second, the question is, are you glorifying God with your body as fully as you could? And thirdly, are you pre-programming your body? Because now when it comes time to be married, you have pre-programmed your body to become partially aroused and then to stop. It's actually problematic, especially when it comes to a woman and sexuality. The literature is showing this. So Anything that, and again, there are several different aspects here. Like, for example, I know of one couple that said, praying together, we found such an intimate bonding act that we really had to be careful and limit that. And that may be so with one couple, and not so. My wife and I did not find that. We prayed together when I asked her if she would start going out with me, and we prayed together all the time ever since, and that was okay. But, so you have to understand as a couple too, what are my trigger points? What are my risk zones? And now who's going to help me? And lay out your strategy ahead of time, because when it's so exciting that someone wants to like you and be with you and touch you, that's the wrong time to start thinking about boundaries. Because it is so exciting, and it is so wonderful, and it is so amazing, and God has made us to want one step to lead to the next. And when you're a teenager, you've got lots of hormones and few brains, okay? So you need help, and I know because I was one. You need help to set those boundaries. You need accountability, whether from a dad or an older brother or sibling or a friend. My future brother-in-law and I, we held each other accountable every week. How are things going? Are you holding to the boundaries? What do you find difficult? What are you doing in those areas where you find difficult? Right? So I do this now with the young man who's courting my daughter. And I interact back and forth about this and check in on their relationship. So,
just a second.
Am I skipping something?
Yeah, we're skipping
Location?
something.
Yeah.
When we teaching boundaries for the stages, we're skipping the most important stage, friendship. It's very important for teenagers or for a couple who wants to start dating to first focus on friendship. No physical contact at all. So really focus on becoming best friends. Doing things together within a youth group setting, within a family setting. Really focus on character and why you are drawn to that person.
Remember what I said about sexuality. Before you touch your body, touch your heart and mind. So I'm teaching that principle right now already at the dating stage. Think about character. In fact, the Song of Solomon begins with character. The bride describes the character of the guy she's attracted to for the first verses, the first half of chapter 1. That's not by accident. It's what you know about each other's character and values.
Yeah. I think especially in marriage counseling over the years, we have met so many couples who honestly never really talked about the big things in life. But they were ready for marriage. So it wasn't until they came for marriage class, what was it, half a year before their wedding, that they actually started talking about a lot of the things like, how are we going to do this, or how are we going to do that?
And that's because we brought it up. We have to keep moving, otherwise we're going to run out of time here. So let's go to, so I'm going to do now the parts about men and women, and I will speed through them, and I'm capable of speeding through them. My dad said to me once, sometimes listening to you talk is like trying to take a drink from a fire hydrant, not a drinking fountain. But anyway, that's what dads are for. Young men, I will be short and sweet because Proverbs is short and sweet. Proverbs was written to train young men. So, how are young men tempted? The graphic, the visual, the imagination. Have you ever noticed that Proverbs fights fire with fire? So read those first 7 chapters of Proverbs and notice the imagery. Solomon says, can a man take hot coals and put them in his pants and not be burned? So say to him, son, let's say you're at a campfire and I take the tongs and I take out a glowing hot coal and I put it into your pocket. What goes through your mind when you think of that? You can feel the flesh sear, okay? Temptation seems so attractive, but just remember what's really the case. It's like a loaded gun, or as I go through Proverbs 7, I talk about to my catechism students, that poor dumb schmuck. And then they laugh, and then I look at them and I say, that poor dumb schmuck is you, and that poor dumb schmuck is me. Lured, seduced by the siren song, thinking it's innocent, thinking it's harmless, thinking it's easy and it's fun until you've got pants full of hot coals. And until you're the one who's dealing with this graphic thing. And also, model integrity yourself. I know one son who said, said about his dad, it's sad, the old dog looks at every woman he sees. What are you doing with your eyes? Can you walk in public and your son look at your eyes and know where they are? Or do you wear those nicely colored sunglasses so that you can ogle whoever you want to pass by without anybody being able to see your eyes? Okay? So model it yourself. Show your son, I've got a filter on my internet device, son. This is how it works. Your mother has the password. I can't even change it if I want to, because I'm showing you that I'm doing exactly what I told you to. If you look in the Bible, dating is a family matter. This idea about the individual is a very Western thing. I'm studying sociology for my PhD, and they talk about the dyadic personality. Without getting technical, what that means is this. In the ancient world, you are defined by lots of things you never chose. Your family, your tribe, the values that come from that. So dads need to be involved because, again, young men have more hormones than brains. Okay? So if a young man wants to date my daughter, or if my son is interested in a girl, this is what I'm going to ask. Number one, I want to make sure that you see more in her than a body, that you see character. If you know nothing about her character, you're not ready. Number two, what are your plans for life? How are you going to be able to provide for a family, and how close are you to being able to do so? Okay? Number three, what is your plan in light of question two? How long could it be before you could be ready for marriage? So are you going to pace this relationship initially just being good friends, knowing you have romantic interests, but just keeping those boundaries clear? And what do you think is the best way to get to really know someone? It's not when you're together. It's when you're doing the dishes and seeing how she treats her dad and he treats his mom, and seeing family life and interaction, because that's what life is like. And look for character. There's an old Dutch saying.
You can find the questions in the middle.
Yes, the questions that I'm asking are in the middle of your folder. So you don't
Right in the middle.
I skipped them the other night because I knew I was going to get to them now. Okay? So there's an old Dutch saying, if you marry a woman for her body, you're going to lose the body and keep the woman. Okay? And you have to marry a whole person. Okay? 4, how are you going to guard the sexual integrity of my daughter? Realize that physical touch for a woman produces emotional bonding at a level much deeper than a man. Studies have shown that a hug and a lingering kiss gives a woman the same release of chemicals as a sexual orgasm does in a man. Then don't mess with the girls. Let them learn to trust and know your character before you touch their bodies. Right? So, and are you willing to accept accountability from me? Are you viewing pornography? If so, what have you done to detox your soul from this, and how far are you willing to go to accept accountability from me? And number 6, how do you plan on being a spiritual leader? So, the young man who's now dating my daughter was asked all these questions. I did not tell my daughter ahead of time because I knew she would freak out. I told her after, and she still freaked out. And then I said, honey, listen, he passed the test. I said he passed in all categories. He did. Now suddenly, this guy has got some character that maybe I didn't know about. Okay? Jonathan Vermeer would say to his sisters, you ask him about porn or I will. I would say his dad's. You don't have to ask him, I'm going to ask him. Song of Solomon. Again, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to have to skip through this. But this wonderful book by Douglas Sean O'Donnell, the last chapter is called Virginity is a Community Project, and he bases it on this. Look at how just beautifully blunt the Bible is. This, by the way, is one of the foundational texts for modesty, too. It just says the bride and the groom look at each other and say, now we got a little sister, she's just growing into puberty, what are we going to do for her? We're going to enclose her. But this is not a body-shaming thing because we're building it out of silver. Okay? And we are going to protect her in a crazy culture and from sin and evil. And there's a 5-step protection plan to that. So this is O'Donnell's 5-part protection plan that family, yet you build walls and towers, that peers in the Song of Solomon are exhorting each other, don't stir love until it's time. Right? This is why the Song of Solomon says this, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. They're attracted to each other. And then the next line over and over until the wedding is, but let's not arouse and stir love until it's time. Right? Community protection. Right? Again, this is his nicer way of saying you have lots of hormones and few brains. Because passion is pleasurable, and our bodies tell us that before we're smart enough to know what to do with it. Self-protection or resolve, you find this in this passage as well, and knowledge. Right? So this is fascinating, and I don't have time to develop this, but just think about this. Proverbs, especially for boys, Song of Solomon, especially for women. There's a lot about relationality in the Song of Solomon. And why do you wait? Well, this passage says, first of all, you have the blessing of peace. I've never yet met one couple who said, we went further than we should have when we dated, and now they look at it and they say, we regret it, and why were we so stupid? I've never met one couple who kept the boundaries and said, I regretted it, we should have just been making out more. These are the types of sins that don't hit you in the moment, but then 5 years later and 10 years later, when the consequences and impact hit you, it's, oh, how come? Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to
about
jump in here?
Why wait? I can't recommend the full background of this website and the things they produce, but I listened to one podcast from The Porch. So if you go on Spotify, you can look it up, The Porch, and there is one podcast about why wait. I cannot do it better. This man does an excellent job about boundary setting God's word and why. And it's so compelling, it actually circulated in our own church under some of the couples that were dating or engaged. And it's very, very good. So it's from The Porch, and it's about the question, why wait?
So this is a good way where the young people were actually circulating this, and I didn't have to do it. Again, it's part of the community protection plan, right? That if your peers are saying, listen to this, oh, wow, okay, look at that, that's cool. So this type of, and again, as parents, sometimes people don't say anything, A, because they're just ashamed to admit their own mistakes, but realize something. If you admit some of your own mistakes to your kids and say, you know, we thought the same thing when you were your age, oh, come on, we can French kiss all the time, it doesn't matter. And now we look at it and say, you know what? Or whatever mistakes you made, you say, A, it tells them mom and dad are human, B, that it's okay to talk about mistakes, and C, that you can go to mom and dad when you've messed up. Right? So use your own mistakes to build a bond with your children without glorifying or going into the details. Here's another way for young women, okay? Because so often a young woman falls in this trap. Oh, he likes me. He thinks I'm amazing. He wants me. And before even, whether you're ready for a relationship or you know him, you're in the relationship and then you feel trapped and stuck. So we have our daughters, before they're ever going to date anybody, and I'm not convinced that anybody needs to date in high school, although I do give my kids a little bit of wiggle room, but I talk to them about the challenges of this in grade 12. We have our daughter make a chart, okay? Non-negotiables. Make this before you're ever dating or going out with anybody. What are things that are important and what are things nice but not essential? Our family likes camping, so it'd be nice if they like camping. Dad likes fishing, so he better like fish. No, wait a minute, that's not my list. Okay, that can go off. But then you're getting them to develop their own list, and now you can say, this guy likes me. Okay, does he check the box? You made the list. Because when you've got more hormones than brains, the excitement of someone liking you takes over and your list goes, okay? So develop these things ahead of time and help kids understand why. If you were dating 7 times in high school, you made out with 6 guys. I talked to one woman who said, you know what, there I sit at the Lord's table, and I was dating, and I went to bed with him, and now we sit at the Lord's table together, and sometimes I'm so overcome with shame that I can't enjoy the Lord's Supper anymore. You don't think about that when you're 60, but you should. So use these things to reinforce biblical convictions. So when I was engaged, my mom, I don't know where she got it from. I don't agree with that approach in the Song of Solomon, but because it was totally just love and marriage, not typology as well. But my mom gave me a list of 10 tapes on the Song of Solomon. I listened to them all in the car as I was driving back and forth to university. Now, I don't know how many moms would do that, but my mom did. So you can give them resources that allow them to answer the questions they need, because so that Dr. Google seems lame. Last but not least.
Here.
Is there something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I have one more. I thought I just wanted to add one more thing. Is we're parents of 6 children, but we're not standing here as parents who can check all the boxes of successful parenthood and that we've passed the test. I think, as many of the moms here, that I am literally in a battlefield. And I think the exhausting job being a mom is not the piles of laundry and the piles of food I'm cooking every day, but is this, the emotional and the upbringing of your children and sexual upbringing. That takes a tremendous amount of energy and thinking and preparation. If your child wants to watch a certain series, that means that I, as a mom, want to watch it too, because she can tell me that all her friends in school are watching it. But that means that I need to watch it too and see if it's actually okay. It takes a lot of time and energy. one more thing that we forgot about is that strained relationships within the family. One of the reasons why you shouldn't wait with talking to your children until they're 17, because then it can be all of a sudden really, really hard and awkward. But if there is that strained relationship, encourage your child to find a godly adult in his community, either at school or in the church or in the family, that he does feel comfortable or she feels comfortable talking with. And then I would love to close with this last thought. Often when I talk to moms, there is a certain amount of fear, like fear of what are my children all going to struggle with? Like, what are they going to face? Will they be able to stand strong in this society? And I was struck in the weeks of Lent when I was reading about Christ speaking to his disciples in the upper room, where Christ was actually warning his disciples for the hardship and the persecution and the difficulties they were going to face. But that Christ ends with the words, "But do not fear, I have overcome the world."
So yeah, we went slightly over time, but usually on this topic, people want us to go longer, not shorter. So
this book covers a lot more.
Safety.
Yeah. So it's for sale by Reformed Book Services. Safeguards, shielding our homes and equipping our kids. And it covers a lot. So I highly recommend this book.
Yes, thank you very much, Pastor and Mrs. Moerdijk. I'll actually ask you if you're both willing to join the Q&A panel, that would be appreciated, as well as Pastor and Andre, if you're willing to. As we're getting set up for that, I will